you go up in front of the audience, you're practicing for weeks, months, it's finally time to do your performance. And as you go through your performance, you look out at the audience and you suddenly realize that you're not connecting. It's not getting anywhere through to these people. They're just staring at you like you're a creature from another planet. Something they've never seen before. Something they don't want to see again. You ever had this experience? You go out on stage and suddenly discover all the stuff you're working on just doesn't work. All those things you carefully planned just somehow don't connect. That's what happens when you're not aware of your audience type. And there are three particular audience types that are more challenging than the others. If you don't understand these audience types, you go out there and you do your usual stuff. The stuff you think it's going to work is going to be surefire, always connect, and yet it doesn't work. Somehow the stories just don't connect, they don't work, they don't get people involved, and afterwards you hear comments like, "Who was an idiot who hired that moron? That one will never work again." It all happens because you didn't understand the audience type. You didn't understand really what the audience was about. Now, if you do understand the audience type, you don't get in those situations. You go out there, do your thing, you go through it, and afterwards people think, "Good." And they say, "Great job. I really like what you did. Really, really worked for me." And the challenge about it is that understanding the audience type means you have to adjust a little bit your presentation for different audiences. It's tempting to just simply go out there with one thing. This is my presentation. That's it. This is the way I do it. Take it or leave it. But some audiences just want to leave it. So you can't just go out there with just one way to perform. You have to be able to do a little bit of adjusting based on your audience. And most audiences are pretty straightforward. Pretty simple. It's not really a big deal. You don't have to do that much adjustment of it. But there are three audience types, three particular audience types, that if you don't adjust for them, things go bad pretty quickly. And it's awareness of these three audience types and awareness of what you have to do on stage that's so important. Otherwise, you go out there on stage and you stand in front of people and it's just, you start thinking, "This was a mistake. I shouldn't be here. I'm in front of the wrong audience." What it is you're simply giving the wrong type of speech to that audience. Now, does that mean you have to make huge changes and redo everything you have? No, it doesn't mean that. You don't have to make huge changes. Small changes will work. Just a few small changes and you can have a good presentation. And it'll work and it'll connect. A few small changes. So today, you're going to learn about three important different audience types and how crucial it is to understand these audience types. What will tip you off when you're looking at a different audience type? So when you come across one of these three, you'll instantly say, "That's it. I remember Tim mentioned this audience type. Now I know what I have to do." We'll step you through. I'll step you through the basics of just how you deal with each different audience. Little adjustments you can make to your speech. Not major things. Little adjustments you can make to your speech that will make it be more effective, make it connect in, and make sure you don't bomb on stage. Today, you're going to learn about those three audience types and how to connect in with those most challenging of audiences. And you look around, and we're it's looking at you very steadily. And you go into your first joke, the first surefire thing you have. Every time you told it before, audience just breaks up laughing. Every time you told it before, the audience is just on the floor. You know this is a surefire joke. You know it's funny. And you give that joke to your audience. And you hear nothing. Nothing. The whole audience just stares at you. Not a chuckle, not a snort, not a giggle, nothing. And if you didn't mess up telling the joke, that's because you're dealing with that first audience type I want to talk about today, the serious audience. Usually these are sort of the scientific people. Engineers are one of the classic examples of the serious audience. Jokes just aren't something they really express about. But you can't tell whether or not they think something is funny. Their reaction won't clue you in at all. You have to kind of go along with it. If you're dealing with a serious audience type, you might want to be careful about telling jokes if you're the sort of person who needs to have the feedback of people laughing at what you say. If you're dealing with a serious audience type, you tell jokes, just pretend they're just straight lines. Don't even think of them as jokes. Just say them just right. If you've got a bunch of jokes written in and normally got pause for laughter, forget about the pauses. Just go all the way through. The thing about the serious audience is the serious audience is really looking for that point-by-point description. The vague, big, flowery terms just are not going to get them going. So make sure you have some details. Make sure you're very detailed. If you don't have any details and you're kind of all general about, oh, this is kind of the way things go and this sort of happens and you all know how that works, take that part out, throw some details in instead. You don't have to rewrite your entire speech. Just put in a few details, because that's what this serious type audience is looking for. Serious type audience wants to see details. They want to see what's the process that's getting me from here to there, and how do I duplicate that process. This audience wants step by step by step. And as far as big stories, okay, you can tell your story, but make sure that story has a point, and then focus on that point and give real details about what that point is. World champion speaker Darren McCroy tells about a time he was speaking to a bunch of engineers. And he had, like I mentioned at the beginning, he had some jokes. Surefire stuff. He went through, he did his jokes. Nobody laughed. He did the next joke. Nobody laughed. He went through the whole thing, and he just was convinced. He thought, I'm bombing up here. I'm dying. After his speech was over, one of the engineers, the most serious-looking engineer of everyone in the entire audience, came over to him and said, Darren, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard. So you can connect with jokes in the serious type. It's just that they aren't necessarily going to laugh. And if you just tell jokes all the way through, it's really not going to work. Have some details. Have a process, step by step by step. If you can have a few pictures, a few graphs and diagrams, those go very well with a serious type audience. The challenge is you're not going to get much feedback from the audience. So you have to have confidence that you're going in the right direction. You have to do everything step by step. Clearly lay everything out. You're dealing with the serious audience. You look out at the audience and you notice something's a little bit off. You're not quite sure what it is. There's something a little bit off about them. And some things have been going a little bit strange there, so you start pointing them out. You start making fun of some of the things you see going out in the audience. And out of nowhere, somebody in the audience yells, "That's not funny! It's not nice to laugh at us!" And you have to say, "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to upset anybody." That's when you know you're dealing with the second type of audience. The second type of audience. The second type of audience is the worried type. They're worried. They're scared. There's something going on scaring them, it's freaking them out. And they're worried about it all the time. And while it's a general rule that you don't want to make fun of your audience, bad things happen to you, that's funny. Bad things happen to your audience, that's not funny. When you've got the worried audience, it's even more important to make it clear that, hey, you're not laughing at them because they're already stressed. You got to talk to the type. You got to talk to the type of audience you have out there. And if you have the worried type, they're going to be quick to react, kind of all keyed up. And if you start making jokes about them or making fun of them, it's a disaster. Talk to the type. When you're talking to the worried type, it's all about making them feel emotionally comfortable. Think about if you had gone through some sort of situation, or when you've gone through some sort of situation that is very stressful, very emotional, that makes you worried, scared, uncertain. Maybe you've gone through a situation where your company let go a lot of people. You wondered if you were going to be next. Maybe you've recently been let go. You wonder what next to do. Now, just think how you'd feel somebody coming out and pointing out that to you, or making fun of you for it. Get upset. Well, that's what happens when you have the worried type of audience. Something bad happened to this audience, or the audience is afraid that something bad might happen. They're scared, they're nervous. What they really need is to know that it's going to be okay, and they can make it through this. Things will develop, things will be better, and they'll be better for it. They can get through this, they just take a little bit of time. So the worried type of audience, it's all about emotional comfort, emotional calming, those sort of things. Now, to talk to the type, to talk to the worried type of audience, it's also a good thing that they're so worried and nervous. Because if your audience is worried and nervous and concerned, and you've got some sort of cure for that concern, you can do something to make things better, then they're going to follow you. You're going to think about following and think about going. Just think about it. If you were nervous and scared and someone was kind of calming you down and relaxing you, that'd feel pretty good. The worried audience, that's what it's all about. Emotional connection. Now, the thing about in speaking is that you want to get people kind of keyed up and nervous, because if they aren't nervous or concerned or worried, they're not going to do anything. If you really want people to get something, get them a little bit nervous. So you might say something like, might be wondering, you're going to keep your job? Are we thinking, I don't know if I'm going to have my job tomorrow? It's okay, that's normal. Normal to be scared about those sort of things. If you're really concerned about that, here's some things you can do to make sure whatever happens, that you're going to be okay. Pump up the pain a little bit, and then say, hey, here's a solution. You have the worried type of audience, and wait, that's the best type. The worried type of audience is just ready to get motivated. They're just scared enough. They want to do something to solve the problems. So if you claim and can show that you've got some sort of solution for them, they're all over it. They're right there. So talk to the type. When you deal with the second type of audience, the worried type of audience, make sure you emotionally calm them. First, emotionally build them up, and then provide a solution to the things that worry them. You're talking to the audience. And as you talk to the audience, you notice that everybody looks a little different from you. somehow this audience looks a little bit different from you. And you notice as you're talking, people are turning their heads towards you. They're just moving a little bit. There's a little bit of confusion in their eyes. Jokes which were so solid and so easy and so simple, all of a sudden don't work. It's not dead silence. It's more like a kind of questioning, unknowing silence. It's just a really confusion going on out there in your audience. And that's when you know you're dealing with a third type of audience. The foreign audience. As the world becomes more and more of a mixing pot, there's a better chance, a better and better chance that you're going to be out there talking in front of people who don't speak English as a first language, who don't think of the things of culture the way that you think of them. And if you happen to be fortunate enough to be touring, and you've gone to a foreign country, and you're dealing with a whole entirely different culture. And some things are perfectly okay in the US are not okay over there. You just have to get used to it. One major thing that speakers remark on is that in Asian cultures, some Asian cultures, it's considered rude to stare at a person. So, whereas the US is all about getting that eye contact going, that can be considered very rude in some cultures. You have to understand how the culture works. If you're dealing with the foreign type, you got to talk to the type. You said, okay, they probably are having a hard time understanding what I'm saying, so I need to slow down. Just imagine, you're standing in a room of people who are speaking a language different from yours. A language you never grew up with, have learned in school, but don't usually use around the house. And they're just rattling on with this sort of thing, and you're just trying to figure out, what's going on here? What's going on? Slow down. Speaking to a foreign audience, slow down. And you can tell. You look, you see that look of confusion in the eyes, it's like, okay, I have to speak slower. And humor is going to be different. Some of the humorous things that just go with you, you tell jokes about football, American football. Of course, over here we don't call it American football, we call it football. Well, if you're over in England and you say football, it's going to get confusing. Because what England calls football, we call soccer. So there's a confusion there. Understand that. Dealing with a foreign culture, you have to speak the way that's going to connect with that culture. If you're going to talk about football, you have to call it American football, if you're over in England. Otherwise, people will think football, which to you means soccer. Confused? Well, think how the people in England are confused hearing you speak about football. Little things like that can make or break your speech. Just showing a little bit of awareness. Oh, it's American football. Of not staring at the Asian people in your audience. Little things like that can show that you're concerned, you're aware, you're compassionate, and you're really trying to engage with a foreign type of audience. Talk to the type. Foreign type of audience, you want to make sure you're very clear. Make sure you stay away from any cultural issues. You want to make sure the humor arrives out of your story. And if people don't laugh, it's all right. At least the story is okay. So talk to the type. You're dealing with the foreign type. Be clear. Make sure your humor is something they'll understand. And be very aware of the do's and don'ts of that culture. Let's wrap things up now. Go over all the things you've learned today. First type we talked about was the serious type. When you're dealing with the serious type, you You want to make sure that you have everything very detail-oriented. If you have a process that goes step by step by step by step, and the more clearer you can get that through, the clearer you can get that, the better off you are. If you have charts, use them. If you have graphs, use them. Pictures are going to be fine, but they're going to want to have some charts and graphs to back up those pictures. Or sometimes they'll say, oh, instead of a chart and a graph, you use a big picture to make your point. Don't do that with the serious types. Just serious scientific engineering type of types, charts and graphs go much better to convincing them than some picture up there. If you're dealing with the serious type, be very detailed, and don't expect them necessarily to have the same sort of humor as you do, or to laugh in the same way. Just go through your speech, be detailed, be clear, and if you have humor, they may not react to it. Second type talked about with the worried type. The worried type, it's usually because something has gone on. Something bad has happened, or something bad could happen. Companies are going through mergers, or people are scared for their job, or have gone through recent downsizings because there's not enough business going on. Or if there's some other company failure going on and you're speaking to people of that company. Or there's some tragedy going on in a person's life, like cancer or a death in the family. Whatever it is, there's something they're worried about, which is good in a way. Because the more you can build up the worry, the more you can get people to follow your cure. So with the worried types, you want to emotionally connect, build up the worry, and then provide some sort of solution, some sort of way out of the things that worry and bother them. Finally, we talked about the foreign type. Foreign type of speaker. Foreign type of audience. You're the speaker of the foreign type of audience. And a lot of it is just slowing down. Being very aware with the foreign type that you're speaking to people whose the language you're speaking is not the language they're speaking all the time. Something to be aware of. So just take it a little slower, make it easier for them to follow along. And it's a different culture. So make sure if you're doing something in one culture, it's going to work out with the culture you're talking to. Talk to the culture in front of you. Make it clear that you're making this attempt to make this cultural connection. Because there's some things that are perfectly okay in your culture that won't be okay in their culture. So keep in mind, when you're talking to the foreign type of audience, you want to make everything very clear, be very culture aware, and as far as the humor, it may happen, it may come out of the story. Just tell the story, and if the humor happens, that's great. If not, it's okay, you've got a good story anyway. If you don't talk to the type, when you get out there in front of the audience you have, and you go through this speech, you so carefully memorize all the way through, you may find yourself with very surprising results. The audience isn't interested, isn't connecting, is ignoring you, or is actively hostile to you. If you do talk to the type, you make that connection. You make that connection between yourself and the audience. The audience knows that you understand them, you get them. You know how they work. You talk to the type and all of a sudden the audience will think, okay, this person at least gets me. This person understands. This person is speaking to me in a way that connects with me and makes me feel that they really get what's going on. They care about me, so I care about them. Talking to the type isn't about turning over everything you're doing and speaking in an entirely different way. It's about making little adjustments in your speech so that you connect in the audience the best way you can to make that effective connection with them. Talking to the type will develop and grow and build that strong connection in the audience. You get out there in front of the audience, it's tempting to just do things the way you used to do them, the way you practice doing and worked at doing them. Be a little aware of the audience though. So the next time you go in the audience, you really want to connect to that audience, make sure you talk to the type.